Kimberly Cargill had made a good life for herself.
She worked as a nurse, had several children. She lived in a nice home.
You see a woman who seems to have it all together.
But there was always something.
She kind of went through husbands.
4 failed relationships by the time she turned 40.
She was highly impatient and irritable.
The type of person that can push her way around.
But then, when her babysitter was found dead,
The body had been burned.
the authorities would soon be wondering, was she simply high maintenance?
It's her way or no way.
Or was she really a monster?
She has a Jekyll and Hyde personality.
Pretty on the outside, but twisted on the inside.
Tyler, Texas, June 19, 2010. It was around 3:30 on a hot East Texas afternoon as a pizza delivery driver cruised along a country road on the outskirts of this town of 200,000, not quite 2 hours east of Dallas.
Tyler is a pretty old, beautiful little town. A lot of oil money and just kind of East Texas cattle money.
And as the pizza delivery driver had just discovered, there's lots of wide open space, too.
He made a wrong turn and he pulled into a grassy area to make a U-turn.
But as the lost driver slowed down to make the U-turn, he noticed something along the side of the road.
Something that just didn't quite look right.
Whatever it was, the delivery driver was so curious that he stopped the car to investigate.
He didn't know exactly what it was until he got out of the car.
Although when he did get out of the car, the driver had a sickening suspicion that the odd heap on the side of the road was a dead body.
He, at that time, went back to his car and called the police.
Deputies from the Smith County Sheriff's Office were on the scene within minutes. They confirmed what the delivery driver had suspected. The heap at the side of the road was indeed a dead body.
It was an African-American woman between the ages of 18 and 34.
Although considering the condition of the body, further identification of the dead woman would be quite a challenge.
The body had been burned.
She was found with no identifying information. Her face was charred.
Who the dead woman was, why she died, and how she'd ended up on the side of a lonely country road were all unknown.
No one had any idea.
And the key to solving the mystery would turn out to be a middle-class mother of 4 named Kimberly Cargill. Born in Mississippi in 1966, Kimberly Pitts was still a little girl when her mother and stepfather moved to Texas.
Kim Cargill was raised in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Specifically, in the booming community of Richardson.
Richardson is a pretty affluent suburb.
And pretty popular Kimberly fit right in.
She was a good student. She was a cheerleader.
She was very outgoing and had a really kind of bubbly personality.
But while she was a good student, the bubbly cheerleader opted out of college after graduation. Instead, she got married and had a baby.
She had a genuine love of kids.
The love between Kimberly and her husband didn't last, though.
She was the type of person, it's her way or no way.
And as a result, she was divorced and struggling to raise her son on her own by her mid-20s.
Kimberly at that time had a receptionist job at a medical equipment company.
Not only was she living paycheck to paycheck, she was also spending a lot of money on legal fees.
She was going through a pretty bitter and highly intense custody battle.
Kimberly ultimately lost the battle and custody of her son. She had visitation rights and did her best to stay in touch, but it was still a devastating loss. So when a mutual friend introduced her to Brian Cargill in October of 1992, she was happy for the diversion.
We kind of did a blind double date for our first date and had a really nice time that night.
She came across as very nice and friendly.
She was very gregarious. When she walked in the room, she kind of let everyone know that she was there.
The couple started dating, and within a year, they were married and expecting.
We had been dating for about 3 months or so, and she got pregnant. Those were the circumstances under which we got married.
Kimberly gave birth to Brian's son, her second. But soon after, Brian says that she had become impossible to live with any longer.
She was highly impatient and irritable just at a moment's notice and would sort of just snap.
After only 3 years, the marriage ended in divorce, and Kimberly moved on.
Not long after we got divorced, she had met another man and lived with him for a while.
Kim and her new boyfriend never married and soon broke up, but not before she had his baby, too. And by the year 2000, Kimberly was on her own again with 2 children to care for and had recently relocated to the Tyler area to attend college.
She moved there to be closer to Tyler Junior College so she could earn her degree.
And once she graduated, she was on the path for a promising new career, one that involved helping people.
Kim Cargill was a licensed vocational nurse, an LVN.
She's just one step below an RN.
However, there was at least one cloud hanging over Kimberly's fresh start: her ex-husband, Brian Cargill.
I tried to get supervised visitation. I tried on a couple of occasions to try and get custody.
And in 2006, his efforts finally paid off.
Eventually, I was successful, but it was after spending many thousands of dollars.
Getting outmaneuvered in court was disappointing enough, but Kimberly also felt increasingly shut out of the boy's life.
Brian, this is Kimberly. I haven't talked to my son since Tuesday afternoon. I've never gone this long without speaking to him.
Although according to her ex, he was merely doing what their son wanted.
He knows that it's you on the phone. He knows it's you on the phone. I said, when your mom calls back, do you want to talk to her? And he doesn't want to talk.
I don't believe you. He's never not wanted to talk to me.
However, even in the midst of Kimberly's bitter battle with Brian over the custody of their son, she continued to move on. In 2005, she met and married her third husband, and a year later gave birth to his son.
She had 4 children.
However, within a year of the child's birth, her third marriage had also ended in divorce.
She kind of went through husbands.
Still, despite her string of failed relationships, by 2010, Kimberly had a lot of positive things going on in her life. She had a good job.
She worked at a pretty well-known chain of hospitals in East Texas.
She took care of patients after they'd had a surgical procedure.
She had a comfortable home in a middle-class bedroom community outside Tyler.
White House, Texas is kind of a suburb of Tyler. It was a nice place to raise a family.
And even after the disappointing custody decisions, she still had a family to raise, her 11-year-old and 4-year-old sons.
When you look at Kimberly Cargill, you see a woman who seems to have it all together.
However, since her 4-year-old had yet to start school, there was still one thing the working mother needed: affordable childcare. And for that, she turned to 39-year-old Cherry Walker. In many ways, Cherry, or Sherry as her friends sometimes called her, was everything a mother could want in a babysitter.
She was a sweet person, very kind, always willing to help.
She's a very kind of pure-hearted person.
Her dad is a preacher in Tyler, Texas.
And Cherry had never gone too far from home due to her disability.
She has seizure disorders.
When Cherry becomes upset, she begins to shake or quiver.
They were controlled by the medication.
The medication also meant that Cherry was able to live on her own.
Cherry wanted to be independent.
She got an apartment. She was staying like in a little 1-bedroom apartment.
She mostly lived off Social Security disability payments and money from her parents, but she also worked at the local Goodwill.
She lived a very humble lifestyle.
And she did some babysitting to earn extra cash as well.
Cherry loved children.
And it was through babysitting that Cherry met Kimberly in 2009.
Kimberly employed Cherry to babysit her young son while she was at work.
She was babysitting 2 different families. She kept care of Kimberly's son more than she did anybody else's.
Cherry really bonded with the little boy, too.
Cherry had a close relationship with the boy and loved him as one of her own.
Cherry is described as being this wonderful, caring, kind, open-hearted person.
But was she dependable? Because on the evening of June 18, 2010, Cherry Walker would suddenly disappear. It was around 3:30 on the afternoon of June 19, 2010, when a pizza delivery driver lost outside Tyler, Texas, made a shocking discovery on a lonely stretch of rural road.
A pizza delivery driver was driving by a very low-traveled roadway in Smith County and saw what appeared to be a badly burned body.
The driver immediately called 911, and when Smith County Sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene minutes later, they were confronted with a mystery. A young African-American woman who'd been dumped by the side of the road, doused with lighter fluid, and then set on fire.
The body was very badly burned, really scorched, and so no, it was not immediately known who this person was.
There was no wallet, no purse, no identification at all. But when the coroner's personnel arrived on the scene to remove the body, investigators did find one seemingly minor clue crumpled in the grass: an empty single-serve cup of coffee creamer.
Still intact, which was pretty remarkable because everything was burned except for this piece of evidence.
The creamer cup was bagged and sent to the crime lab. Meanwhile, the body was turned over to the Smith County medical examiner for autopsy. Although considering the condition of the body, it was hard to determine the exact cause of death.
The pathologist couldn't really pinpoint how it happened.
That can happen in some murder cases because either the body's decomposed too much or it's because it was burned, like in this particular case.
All the medical examiner knew for certain was that the lack of smoke in the victim's lungs indicated that she was already dead by the time she'd been set on fire.
There was evidence that perhaps she was strangled and that asphyxiation played a role.
And as far as determining the dead woman's identity, that would require dental records.
That usually is an important aspect of determining and identifying bodies. When facial features are burned beyond recognition and fingerprints are burned.
However, before they could request dental records, the investigators would need a tentative ID in order to obtain the records for comparison. So with no possible leads, the investigators turned to the local media.
The news was reporting that there was a body found.
And the following day, Sunday, June 20th, the investigators got a phone call from a minister in Tyler.
He called in to the police and said, "That may be my daughter."
The minister said that his daughter, Cherry Walker, hadn't been at church that morning.
Cherry's father became really concerned. She was nowhere to be found.
And she wasn't one to miss services at her father's church, especially not that Sunday.
It was Father's Day. And when the news story broke that there had been a body found in Smith County, Pastor Walker called in.
Cherry's father had a gut feeling that it was his daughter.
But were his instincts correct?
He didn't want to believe it.
Unfortunately for her family, once the authorities had a tentative identification, the medical examiner was able to confirm that the dead body was Cherry.
They used her dental records from her dentist here locally, and they made an identification that way.
But how had Cherry ended up dead on a country road?
Cherry didn't drive. Someone had to have taken her.
And according to her family, it was almost certain to have been someone she knew.
Cherry wouldn't hop in the car with a stranger.
And according to her father, there was someone Cherry had been spending a lot of time with lately, a young man she had worked with at Goodwill, Joseph Mayo.
We became friends and we started talking to each other and went over to her apartment and watched movies with her. She was a huge horror film fan.
Within hours, the investigators were knocking on Joseph's door.
They said, "You're gonna have to come with us." And I said, "For what? I didn't do anything."
That's what Joseph said. But when the investigators brought him down to the sheriff's office and started asking how he knew Cherry and when he'd last seen her, he said something that didn't sound quite so innocent.
I said, "How was she killed?"
It was an interesting thing to ask, considering that the investigators hadn't told Joseph that Cherry was dead.
And they said, "How did you know she was killed?" I said, "I don't know, I just took a guess."
The investigators didn't believe that for a minute.
They interrogated me with all these hurtful, mean questions. Like, one of the investigators said, "Oh, we know you did it, and you are going down." And I was crying. I had tears coming out of my eyes. Do you honestly think I would do something like this?
Cherry's friends didn't think so.
I don't believe Joseph would do that.
But what would the evidence say?
They fingerprinted my car. They didn't find no fingerprints except mine.
He also had an alibi for the night before, singing karaoke.
I wasn't nowhere near her apartment.
And when the investigators followed up at the karaoke club, his alibi not only checked out, there was even video of him performing.
The deputy said, "Don't worry, you're fine."
Cherry's boyfriend Joseph may have been fine, but the investigators were no closer to finding her killer. So looking for any other possible leads, they contacted Cherry's friend, Paula Wheeler.
The deputy called me at 10:20 that Sunday night, and he said she was dead.
And Paula's response was every bit as surprising as Joseph's had been.
I told him I know who did it.
Paula identified the killer as the woman Cherry worked for as a babysitter.
Kim Cargill did it.
The investigator was taken aback by the accusation.
He said, "Well, ma'am, you can't prove that." I said, "Yes, I can."
When Paula sat down with the investigators the next morning at the sheriff's office, she told them that it all had to do with Cherry's disability. According to Paula, the fact that she had seizures was only a small part of Cherry's disability.
She's just a mental challenge. She's just like a little kid.
Had the mental capacity of around a 9-year-old child.
There were a lot of things she couldn't do for herself.
In fact, that was how Paula knew Cherry. A local social service nonprofit had hired her as Cherry's caretaker.
I had to teach her how to live on her own. I had to teach her phone number, her address, teach her how to cook. She would call Cherry every evening to remind her to take her meds.
And according to Paula, Kimberly didn't see Cherry's childlike nature and her forgetfulness as a disadvantage when it came to her babysitting. In fact, Paula claimed that Kimberly had frequently taken advantage of it.
Majority of the time, Kim did not pay Cherry.
And when Kimberly did pay her, Paula said it was often less than she deserved.
She'll pay her like $20 a week.
And Paula claimed that Kimberly would get away with it because Cherry simply didn't understand money.
If you give her 5-1, she thinks she have a lot of money.
And according to Paula, Cherry would often spend what little money she did have on Kimberly's son.
When Kimberly would drop him off, she wouldn't leave any extra food. Cherry would have to buy food for him.
Cherry was getting food stamps. She was taking her own food stamps and buying food for the child.
And yet, despite all of that, Paula said that sweet, innocent Cherry still thought of Kimberly as a friend.
Cherry didn't understand that she was being taken advantage of. She did not understand at all.
She was very nice and she was very compassionate.
She trusted her. She's like a kid. You trust people that you love.
If what Paula said was true, that made Kimberly a lousy employer and a bad person. But how did that make her a murderer? According to Paula, it had to do with something that happened on Friday, the day before Cherry's body was found.
At approximately 10:20 in the morning, Cherry Walker was served with a subpoena.
Cherry had been summoned to testify in court as part of the latest custody fight involving Kimberly and her little boy.
One of her ex-husbands and his mother were seeking joint custody of her 4-year-old son.
Paula said she'd been at Cherry's apartment when the subpoena was served, and that Cherry had been very confused and worried by the summons.
She asked me, do she have to go? And I said, yes.
But then, when Cherry called Kimberly and told her about the summons,
Kimberly tells Cherry, don't worry about it. You don't have to testify.
It was certainly in Kimberly's best interest that Cherry not testify.
They found out that she was babysitting a child, that they would take the child from Kim.
Cherry Walker was, frankly, probably not really the best choice for a caretaker for a young child.
Concerned about what she was overhearing, Paula said she had taken the phone from Cherry and spoken to Kim directly. And according to Paula, Kimberly said she had a plan to make sure that Cherry didn't appear in court that day.
Because she would come pick her up and hide her out.
On Saturday, June 19, 2010, a pizza delivery driver discovered a dead body dumped beside a rural road outside Tyler, Texas.
He called authorities, and the Smith County Sheriff's Department came out.
The body had been identified as 39-year-old Cherry Walker.
She had some certain, what people might call mental deficiencies. She was very simple.
She was not able to live on her own without some caregiver coming in every day to assist her.
She was a very sweet, caring person. She always wanted to help. How could somebody set her on fire like that?
The crime scene had yielded only a single clue that might lead to the killer.
Beneath Cherry's body was a coffee creamer.
But when the investigators spoke to Cherry's caregiver, she had identified her killer as 43-year-old Kimberly Cargill.
Kimberly employed Cherry to babysit her young son while she was at work.
But why would Kimberly want to kill her babysitter? Cherry's caregiver, Paula Wheeler, said it had all started when Cherry received a summons to testify in a court case to decide whether Kimberly or her ex-husband should have custody of the couple's 4-year-old son, a possibility that worried Kimberly, according to Paula.
Kimberly gets on the phone with Paula and tells her if they get her to testify, she'll ruin me.
The decisions that parents make on the caregivers for their child is going to come into play, and it's going to be pretty obvious in a situation like this to a judge that the caregiver has the mental capacity of a child.
You don't dump your child off on a mental challenged person.
So according to Paula, Kimberly had come up with a plan to keep Cherry from testifying.
Kim had said she was going to take her to her house and hide her out so she wouldn't have to testify on that Wednesday.
Paula said she'd told Kimberly that Cherry couldn't do that.
It was crazy.
It was illegal, too.
This is a subpoena. This means you have to go testify.
But according to Paula, that hadn't stopped Kimberly from trying to convince Cherry.
Kim kept calling her.
And Paula claimed that when Kimberly's phone calls failed to bring Cherry around, she had tried to arrange a face-to-face meeting.
Cherry called me again right before 8 o'clock. And she said, I don't feel good, Paula. I'm nervous. Kim wants to take me out to eat, and I don't want to go. She was afraid to tell her no.
Paula told the investigators that she'd urged Cherry not to go.
She tells her, you should just lock the door and don't go out with her.
But Paula also feared that Cherry hadn't taken her advice.
That was my last conversation with her.
But did that mean Kimberly had committed murder? Cherry's caregiver was convinced.
Kim's motive for killing Cherry was to keep her child.
The investigators were skeptical, though. Kimberly didn't exactly fit the profile of someone who would commit such a horrible crime.
Kim Cargill seemed like the average mother.
She worked as a nurse. She had several children. She lived in a nice home.
However, when they looked closer, they did discover a long, often bitter history of disputes with her ex-husbands that had already cost her the custody of 3 of her 4 children. And with another custody hearing just days away,
Kimberly was facing the possibility of losing another son.
and as far as the Smith County Sheriff's Office was concerned, that was enough to put Kimberly at the top of the list of possible killers.
They had a suspect with motives and opportunity.
Everything pointed to Kim Cargill.
But could they find proof? The next day, sheriff's investigators got a search warrant for Kimberly's car.
It was spotless. It was cleaned out.
It was also suspicious, according to people who knew Kimberly.
I've never seen her car clean. It's always just really disgusting. Like just, paper and food and everything.
Fast food bags, Chick-fil-A wrappers, and Burger King bags, and dairy wrappers and creamers.
In light of that, the investigators suspected that Kimberly's suddenly clean car was no coincidence.
Is she cleaning her car to clean out evidence?
But had she missed one piece of evidence because it wasn't in the car?
While they were at the scene and collecting evidence, they found dairy creamers from Burger King.
Had she inadvertently dropped the creamer container at the crime scene? That's what the investigators suspected. All they needed now was a DNA sample to compare it with. And as it turned out, they'd soon have ample opportunity to collect one. While the investigators were trying to solve Cherry's murder, the various Child Protective Services cases against Kimberly also continued to move forward, including the one that had recently cost her the custody of her 11-year-old son. In March, 3 months before Cherry's death, the boy's father had gone to the authorities with some shocking allegations against Kimberly.
She was abusive, she was violent.
It's extremely difficult for people like myself and the other fathers involved to be able to protect their children and to remove them from an extremely abusive environment.
But this time, her ex claimed he had evidence to back his allegations up. Photos of the boy's bruises. On June 24th, 2 days after the search of Kimberly's car, her ex's accusation led to Kimberly's arrest on the charge of injury to a child. And when she was booked into jail, the investigators took the opportunity to collect a DNA sample to see if they could connect her to the container of coffee creamer found near Cherry Walker's body.
They had that dairy creamer.
And while the investigators waited for the results, a friend of Kimberly's came forward and told them about an interesting conversation she'd had with Kimberly shortly after Cherry's body had been found.
Kimberly called her and she was very agitated, and she told her that her babysitter had been found burned and dead in a field.
What was interesting to the investigators, not to mention puzzling to Kimberly's friend, was the timing of the call.
The name of the deceased person had not been released.
How did Kimberly know the body was Cherry's? Was it simply a gut feeling like the one that had led Cherry's father to call the authorities? Or was it something else? The investigators had their answer once results of the DNA test came back.
They found DNA from Kimberly Cargill.
The DNA was the last nail in the coffin because it put her at the scene.
On July 29th, a little more than a month after Cherry's charred body had been found, the Smith County Sheriff's Office once again placed Kimberly under arrest. And this time, the charge was murder. On May 7, 2012, Kimberly Cargill went on trial for murder in Tyler, Texas. The 45-year-old mother of 4 was charged with killing Cherry Walker in June of 2010.
It was a huge deal in East Texas, mother of 4 accused of murdering her babysitter.
What made the crime even more shocking was the fact that the 39-year-old victim was a developmentally challenged woman who suffered from seizures and had the approximate mental capacity of a 9 or 10-year-old child.
Cherry was a sweet, innocent kid in a adult's body.
According to the prosecutor's opening statement, Cherry's childlike innocence was precisely why Kimberly had murdered her, to prevent the woman she'd employed as a babysitter from testifying in a hearing to decide the custody of Kimberly's 4-year-old son.
She feared that if Cherry testified in the upcoming custody hearing, which was set for June 23rd, that she would lose her son.
And when Cherry called Kimberly on June 18th and told her that she'd received a subpoena ordering her to testify,
that's what led to the decision to take matters into her own hands.
Literally.
The state said that Kim strangled Cherry.
Next, according to the prosecution's theory, Kimberly had driven Cherry's lifeless body out to a remote stretch of country road.
Dumped it out of her car, put lighter fluid on her, set her on fire, and just drove away.
She's trash or something.
The prosecution also claimed that the fact that Kimberly brought lighter fluid with her proved that Cherry's murder had been premeditated.
Well, I don't think a lot of people are going to be carrying an accelerant that can be lighted easily around in their car.
And if the crime was premeditated, the prosecutor said that made Kimberly guilty of first-degree murder.
She was facing the death penalty.
To make the case for it, the prosecutor started by calling Cherry's caregiver, Paula Wheeler, to the stand. She told the jury how Kimberly had spent much of the afternoon on June 18, 2010, on the phone with Cherry, urging her not to testify.
She told Cherry that she didn't have to go to court.
But Paula also told the jury that when she'd explained the subpoena to Cherry,
Cherry had made up her mind that she was going to follow the law, and Kim didn't like it.
So much so, according to Paula, that she'd kept calling Cherry, offering to take her out to dinner to talk things over. An offer Paula said she'd urged Cherry to refuse.
I thought Cherry would listen to me and that she wasn't going to go with Kim, but she did.
Kimberly and Cherry's cell phone records both confirmed Paula's account.
Kim had been calling Cherry incessantly all day.
The day before she disappeared, there were over 70 phone calls by Miss Cargill to Sherry Walker's phone.
But according to the prosecution, the truly damning thing about the phone calls was what happened after June 18th, the night that Cherry died.
And suddenly, the phone calls just stopped.
There was no phone calls from Kim Cargill to Sherry Walker.
And the prosecutors said it was no mystery why Kimberly, who'd spent so much of the previous afternoon on the phone with Cherry, would suddenly stop calling.
She obviously knew what happened.
After all, she'd been there. According to the prosecutor, the empty container of coffee creamer found at the crime scene proved that Cherry's body had been dumped from Kimberly's car.
Once they had that dairy creamer tested, they found DNA from Kimberly Cargill.
Motive, opportunity, and DNA evidence that put her at the scene of the crime. The case against Kimberly looked pretty airtight.
The state had a lot of evidence.
But there was one thing missing.
The weakness in the prosecution's case was they couldn't really determine the absolute cause of death.
All the medical examiner could say for certain is that she'd noted a telltale swelling in the tiny blood vessels behind Cherry's eyes.
The pathologist said she could have been strangled.
That wasn't the only possible explanation, though.
Because her body was upside down, that blood might have just been pooling.
And according to the medical examiner, that uncertainty explained why the official cause of death was a little vague.
They called it homicidal violence. They didn't honestly know how she died.
It kind of left the door open for the defense to come in and try to raise reasonable doubt.
Which is precisely what the defense did when they started presenting their case on May 16th. In his open, Kimberly's attorney didn't deny that she dumped Cherry's body by the side of the road or that she'd set her on fire. But according to the defense, that didn't mean Kimberly had killed Cherry.
The defense's version was she died of some other medical condition.
To explain just how that had supposedly happened, the defense turned to the one witness who'd been there.
Kimberly Cargill did take the stand.
And when she did, Kimberly definitely didn't look like someone capable of committing such a brutal murder.
Kim Cargill came across as a very quiet, sort of meek individual in court. She was very timid, just a nice, sweet, average person.
On the stand, Kimberly didn't deny being concerned about the upcoming custody hearing.
She talked about how she was very worried about losing her children.
But Kimberly also said the reason she'd called Cherry so many times that day wasn't to talk her out of testifying. Instead, Kimberly claimed that she only wanted to find out what Cherry was going to say.
She was going to take Sherry out to dinner, and they were just going to talk about the whole thing.
She picks up Cherry, and they go to dinner at 9:30 p.m. They have dinner for about an hour.
According to Kimberly, dinner had gone fine until she was driving Cherry home.
Cherry wants to be dropped off at some friend's house, and Kimberly tells her no. And Cherry becomes upset.
Sherry had a very bad nervous condition. She would shake real bad when she get upset.
And that night, according to Kimberly, Cherry's shaking had become uncontrollable.
Cherry started having a seizure.
Kimberly's testimony is that she started banging her head against the passenger side window.
Kimberly said that she had pulled out of traffic, stopped the car, and tried to perform CPR on the by then unresponsive Cherry, but she claimed it was too late.
Kim tried to help her, but Sherry died.
And when she realized that Cherry was dead, Kimberly said she had panicked.
She's crying. She's sobbing in front of the jury. Yes, I did something wrong. What I did was I made a mistake.
Kim said she felt like she had to get rid of the body because she didn't want to be accused of killing Sherry.
And according to Kimberly, that's why she'd made a second snap decision.
She decides, I've got to get rid of the DNA evidence. I've got to do that. So she just happens to have some lighter fluid in the car and some form of starting that lighter fluid. So she douses her body with the lighting fluid and sets her body on fire.
Finally, her story finished. Kimberly wrapped up her emotional testimony by admitting that she was ashamed of what she did.
Her attorney asked her on the stand, who were you thinking about that night? And she said, myself.
She cried quite a bit on the witness stand, and she kept saying over and over again how she had panicked. She didn't know what else to do.
That's what Kimberly claimed, but the prosecution didn't believe that for a minute. And on cross, they made sure the jury knew why.
She's a nurse. She knew exactly what to do.
It didn't seem very likely that she would have panicked.
Why didn't she call 911? Why didn't she try to seek medical attention?
According to the prosecutor, the answer was simple.
She knew exactly what she was going to do when she got Miss Walker in the car.
On May 18, 2012, at the Smith County Courthouse in Tyler, Texas, the jury announced it had reached a verdict in the murder trial of Kimberly Cargill. The 45-year-old was accused of killing Cherry Walker, the developmentally disabled woman who Kim had employed as a babysitter.
Kimberly found out Cherry was going to testify against her in court.
But while the prosecution had plenty of evidence concerning Kimberly's motive, there was one thing they didn't have, something that the jury had struggled with during deliberations.
The thing that really hung up the jury was that autopsy. They didn't have specific details about how Kim Cargill killed Sherry.
But would that matter when the verdict was read?
She was found guilty.
However, the verdict wasn't all that the jury had to decide.
In Texas, if the person's convicted, they move into a whole sentencing trial.
And now, the question was whether or not the jury would send a mother of four to death row.
She came across as a sympathetic figure.
Although, according to the prosecutors, that was precisely what made Kimberly so dangerous.
She has a Jekyll and Hyde personality.
She was a powder keg waiting to explode.
And the prosecutors had plenty of witnesses willing to testify about her violent temper.
One of her ex-husbands testified that Kim Cargill once threw a hammer at his head because he forgot to get her sundae with no nuts on it.
But the real shock came when 3 of Kimberly's children took the stand. Their testimony made it clear that Kimberly's choice of babysitter was the last thing that made her an unfit mother.
Her children testified that she tortured them.
One of her children testified that one time he folded her clothes wrong and she strangled him until he passed out.
And another's response, when asked about life with his mother, was especially heartbreaking.
There was never a moment when I wasn't afraid.
Sherry Walker was not Kim Cargill's only victim.
Needless to say, by the time her children finished telling their horrifying stories, whatever sympathy the jury might have felt for Kimberly had long since vanished.
The jury sentenced Kim Cargill to death.
Those closest to Cherry were divided on the outcome.
I wanted her to get life so she can go through and suffer.
I'm glad she got the death penalty because she took away the only thing that made me happy.
But they do agree on one thing when it comes to Kimberly. Murdering someone like Cherry was clearly the act of a monster.
Cherry was a good-hearted person. She couldn't understand how people are evil like Kim was. She don't have a heart.
Kim was pretty on the outside, but she was evil and twisted on the inside.
See that? That was amazing. I love this.
The quiet hum of the afternoon sun, a ubiquitous fixture in the heart of East Texas, painted the landscape of Tyler in June of 2010. It was a warmth that promised long, languid days, yet on this particular Saturday, the 19th day of the month, that serene canvas was about to be marred by an act of profound and disturbing cruelty. At approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, a routine, almost mundane event, a pizza delivery driver taking a wrong turn, led to an altogether extraordinary and horrific discovery. This individual, navigating the sprawling country roads that gently curved around the vibrant town of Tyler, a community of around 200,000 souls nestled comfortably, not quite 2 hours' drive to the east of the sprawling metropolis of Dallas, found himself inadvertently charting a course towards a grim truth. Tyler, a town steeped in a history that spoke of elegant antiquity and rustic charm, owed much of its understated affluence to the deep pockets of oil and cattle money, a testament to the region's enduring natural wealth. Yet, as the momentarily disoriented pizza driver would soon discover, beyond the manicured lawns and historic facades, there lay vast expanses of open, untamed land. It was within this very openness that he sought to correct his navigational error, pulling his vehicle into a sprawling, grassy area, intent to execute a simple U-turn and resume his delivery route. As the vehicle slowed, the driver's gaze, perhaps idly scanning the roadside for familiar landmarks or simply absorbing the quiet beauty of the East Texas scenery, snagged on something undeniably amiss. A sight that simply did not conform to the expected rhythm of a pastoral afternoon. There, nestled incongruously along the roadside, lay an object, an indistinct, peculiar heap that stirred a nascent curiosity within him, a curious unease that compelled him to act. The delivery driver, a professional focus on the timely completion of his duties, nonetheless felt an overriding impulse to stop his car, to quell the burgeoning question in his mind, and to investigate this unusual anomaly. It was not until he had fully exited his vehicle, the mundane scent of car exhaust giving way to the earthy fragrance of the East Texas soil, that the full, sickening reality of his discovery dawned upon him. The odd heap, initially a mere curiosity, coalesced into a form that ignited a profound and chilling suspicion within his gut. It was a human body. The realization struck with the force of physical blow, transmuting curiosity into stark terror. Without a moment's hesitation, the delivery driver retreated to the safety of his car, his hands, no doubt trembling, reaching for his phone to dial the emergency services. deputies from the Smith County Sheriff's Office. Their professionalism, a reassuring balm against the burgeoning horror, descended upon the scene within mere minutes. Their trained eyes, accustomed to the raw edges of human tragedy, swiftly confirmed the pizza driver's sickening suspicion. The inert form at the side of the road was, beyond any shadow of a doubt, a deceased human being. The victim was identified as an African-American woman, estimated to be somewhere between the tender age of 18 and the slightly more mature age of 34. However, the initial visual assessment presented a formidable challenge to the deputies. The condition of the body, even at this preliminary stage, made it abundantly clear that further identification would be an arduous and demanding task. The macabre reason for this immediate challenge was brutally apparent. The body had been burned, not merely discolored or scorched, but significantly charred, her features distorted beyond immediate recognition. Furthermore, there was an absence of any immediate identifying information. No wallet, no purse, no personal effects that might offer a quick pathway to her name. The desolate nature of the discovery, stripped of identity and ravaged by fire, amplified the mystery. Who was this woman? Why had she met such a cruel end? And by what chilling series of events had she come to rest upon the forgotten edge of a lonely country road? These questions hung heavy in the stifling East Texas air, devoid of immediate answers. No one, at that initial moment, possessed even the faintest glimmer of insight into the grim tableau. Yet, as the relentless wheels of justice and investigation began to turn, a singular, profoundly unexpected truth would emerge. The key to unlocking this harrowing mystery would ultimately lie with an individual whose life, on the surface, appeared remarkably ordinary, a middle-class mother of four, known to the world as Kimberly Cargill. It was an astonishing revelation, suggesting a hidden depth of darkness beneath a meticulously constructed facade of normalcy. To truly comprehend the intricate web of this narrative, we must first trace the seemingly unremarkable path of Kimberly Pitts. Born in the year 1966 in the verdant landscapes of Mississippi, her formative years in that state were brief, for she was still a little girl when her mother and stepfather, seeking new opportunities or perhaps simply a change of scenery, relocated their family to the Lone Star State. It was in Texas that Kim Cargill, as she would later be known, truly grew into her own. Her youth unfolded within the sprawling, dynamic expanse of the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex, specifically within the thriving and increasingly affluent community of Richardson. Richardson, an undeniably popular and upwardly mobile suburb, offered its residents a quality of life characterized by prosperity and opportunity. Kimberly, by all outward appearances, seemed to slot seamlessly into this environment. She was, from a young age, a good student, a testament to her inherent intelligence and application. Beyond academics, she distinguished herself as a cheerleader, embodying the popular, vivacious archetype of her generation. She cultivated an image of being very outgoing, possessing what many described as a truly bubbly personality, a trait that rendered her engaging and likable to those around her. This initial portrayal, this bright, effervescent persona, is crucial, for it lays the foundation of the Jekyll half of the personality that would later be scrutinized. However, beneath this veneer of academic competence and effusive social grace, there were early indications of a different trajectory. Despite her aptitude as a good student, the bubbly cheerleader, after the pomp and circumstance of graduation, made a conscious decision to opt out of the conventional path of higher education. Instead, she embarked upon a more immediate personal journey, choosing to get married and swiftly thereafter to have a baby. This swift dive into domesticity, while not uncommon, marked a divergence from the expected trajectory of a good student. There was undeniably a genuine love of kids, a maternal instinct that she readily displayed, at least initially. This love for children would, ironically, become a deeply tangled thread in the later tragedy. Yet, The idyllic tableau of newlywed bliss and burgeoning motherhood proved to be as fragile as it was. Hastily constructed, the love between Kimberly and her first husband, for reasons that will become clearer through her subsequent patterns of behavior, simply did not endure. Observers would later characterize her as a person whose modus operandi was inherently rigid. It was quite unequivocally her way or no way. This unwavering inflexibility, this singular insistence on personal control, became a recurrent theme, an underlying fault line in her relational landscape. As an almost inevitable consequence of this unyielding disposition, she found herself, by her mid-20s, divorced and grappling with the demanding, often overwhelming, reality of raising her young son as a single parent. During this period of early independence and familial upheaval, Kimberly held a receptionist job at a medical equipment company, a position that, while providing an income, likely offered little by way of career fulfillment or financial security. She was, by her own account or by the observation of others, living paycheck to paycheck, her already strained finances further burdened by the escalating costs of legal fees. She was, in the throes of her mid-20s, entangled in a rather bitter and intensely consuming custody battle, a protracted legal struggle that underscored her fervent desire for control and her unwillingness to concede. Ultimately, despite her concerted efforts and financial outlays, Kimberly lost the battle. The court's decision awarded custody of her son to his father, leaving her with the profoundly painful outcome of visitation rights. While she undoubtedly did her best to maintain a connection, to stay in touch with her child, the loss of primary custody was, for her, a truly devastating experience. This was not merely a legal setback. It was a deep emotional wound, a blow to her sense of identity and control. It foreshadowed a pattern, a series of losses that would cumulatively fuel a growing resentment and an increasing need for absolute dominion over her life and those within it. It was against this backdrop of personal devastation and emotional vulnerability that a new chapter began to unfold. In October of 1992, a mutual friend, perhaps sensing her need for distraction or companionship, introduced her to Brian Cargill. For Kimberly, the prospect of a new relationship, a new beginning, offered a welcome diversion from the gnawing pain of her recent custody loss. Brian recounts their initial meeting with a certain warmth, describing it as a blind double date that unfolded pleasantly, leading to a really nice time that night. Kimberly, in those early days, projected an image of charming affability. She came across as very nice and friendly, possessing a highly gregarious nature, an almost magnetic quality that ensured her presence was immediately acknowledged and felt in any room she entered. She had a way, as Brian recalled, of kind of letting everyone know that she was there. The spark between them ignited quickly, leading to a whirlwind romance. Within a remarkably short span of time, roughly 3 months into their courtship, Kimberly became pregnant. This pivotal event undeniably altered the trajectory of their relationship, effectively dictating the circumstances under which they chose to formalize their bond. Those were the circumstances under which we got married, Brian candidly stated, highlighting the rapid, perhaps even forced, progression of their commitment. Kimberly soon gave birth to Brian's son, marking the arrival of her second child. However, the domestic bliss that one might expect with a new baby and a newly established marriage proved to be painfully fleeting. Brian's account paints a picture of rapid and alarming deterioration in Kimberly's demeanor. He vividly describes a transformation, asserting that soon after, she became utterly impossible to live with any longer. The amiable, gregarious woman he had initially been drawn to began to display a distressing pattern of behavior. She was highly impatient and irritable just at a moment's notice and would sort of just snap. This marked an escalation of the her way or no way attitude noted in her first marriage, morphing into an almost volatile unpredictability. The marriage, under the strain of such profound behavioral shifts, crumbled with astonishing speed. lasting only 3 brief years before culminating in divorce. Kimberly, ever resilient and seemingly driven by an internal imperative to move forward, did not linger in the aftermath of her second marital dissolution. Not long after the divorce papers were finalized, she embarked on another relationship, moving in with a new man. This cohabitation, however, like her previous marriage, lacked a foundation for lasting commitment. Kim and her new boyfriend, despite building a life together for a period, never formalized their union through marriage and eventually parted ways. Crucially, before their breakup, Kimberly had yet another child with this man. By the dawn of the new millennium, the year 2000, Kimberly Cargill found herself once again standing on her own, a single mother now responsible for the care and upbringing of 2 children, her family expanding even as her relationships contracted. Around this time, seeking both a fresh start and the pursuit of a new professional avenue, Kimberly relocated to the Tyler area. Her move was strategically motivated, aimed at placing her in closer proximity to Tyler Junior College, an institution where she intended to further her education and earn a degree. This decision marked a conscious effort to establish a more stable and promising career path, signaling a desire for self-improvement and perhaps a new professional identity. Indeed, upon graduation, Kimberly embarked on what appeared to be a genuinely promising new career, one intrinsically tied to the noble pursuit of helping people. She became a licensed vocational nurse, or LBN, a professional qualification that placed her just one step below a registered nurse, an RN. This was a profession demanding empathy, meticulousness, and an ability to remain calm under pressure, qualities that, at first glance, seemed to align with the facade she presented to the world. Yet, even with this significant professional achievement and a fresh beginning, there was a persistent cloud that refused to dissipate from Kimberly's otherwise meticulously constructed new life, her second ex-husband, Brian Cargill. Brian, keenly aware of what he perceived as ongoing instability and, perhaps, the continuation of the unacceptable behaviors that had characterized their marriage, had consistently fought for greater involvement in their son's life. His unwavering efforts extended to seeking supervised visitation and, on multiple occasions, attempting to gain full custody of their child. In the year 2006, after a protracted and undoubtedly emotionally draining legal battle, Brian's persistence finally bore fruit. His efforts finally paid off, though he readily admits that this victory came at a significant personal cost. Achieved after spending many thousands of dollars, the courtroom, often a crucible for human emotion, once again witnessed Kimberly's experience of loss. To be outmaneuvered in court, to see the custody of yet another one of her children slip through her grasp, was undoubtedly a profound disappointment for her. But beyond the legal technicalities, Kimberly also harbored a deepening sense of exclusion, feeling increasingly shut out of her own son's life, a perception often amplified by the strictures of legal separation. Brian, however, countered this perspective, asserting that his actions were merely reflective of their son's own wishes. He recounted an instance where Kimberly, in her characteristic direct manner, called to speak with the boy, only for Brian to explain the difficult truth. "He knows that it's you on the phone," Brian recalled telling her, adding, "When your mom calls back, he doesn't want to talk." This exchange, however heartbreaking for all involved, painted a picture of a child's expressed desire for distance, a painful blow to any parent's ego, particularly one as intensely proprietary as Kimberly. Despite the ongoing bitter battle with Brian over the custody of their son, a struggle that continued to chip away at her sense of control and stability, Kimberly pressed on, seemingly determined to build a life on her own terms. In 2005, she once again entered into matrimony, taking her third husband, and, with an almost uncanny rhythm, a year later, she gave birth to a son, her fourth child. This pattern of rapid entry into relationships and subsequent procreation, followed by equally rapid dissolution, spoke volumes about her relational challenges and perhaps a fundamental misunderstanding of the intricate dynamics of lasting partnerships. True to form, within a mere year of this child's birth, her third marriage, mirroring its predecessors, had also unraveled and ended in divorce. The recurring observation, delivered with an air of understated weariness, was simple yet damning. She kind of went through husbands. The phrase itself, redolent with implication, suggests a consumer's approach to marriage, a discarding of partners when they no longer serve a purpose, or, more likely, when they resisted her my way or no way dictates. Still, despite this undeniable string of failed romantic relationships, a testament to an underlying, unresolved emotional turbulence, by the year 2010, Kimberly Cargill, externally at least, presented a compelling picture of stability and success. She had, by this point, successfully cultivated a lot of positive aspects in her life. She held a good job, working diligently at a pretty well-known chain of hospitals in East Texas. Her professional role involved providing care to patients recuperating after surgical procedures, a position that demanded both skill and a certain degree of composure. This public-facing role as a caregiver likely reinforced her carefully constructed facade of empathy and competence. Furthermore, she resided in a comfortable home in a middle-class bedroom community outside Tyler, specifically White House, Texas, often described as a pleasant suburb of Tyler, ideal for raising a family. Even after the disappointing, often infuriating custody decisions that had shaped her recent past, she still had a family to nurture and raise, her 11-year-old and 4-year-old sons, symbols of her enduring maternal role. Indeed, when one observed Kimberly Cargill from a distance, the image that presented itself was one of a woman who, against considerable personal odds, seemed to have it all together. She was a professional nurse, a homeowner, a mother to 2 vibrant young boys. However, there remained one pragmatic detail, a pressing logistical concern, that underscored her busy life. Her 4-year-old son had not yet reached school age. Consequently, this working mother harbored a persistent need for affordable, reliable childcare. It was this specific requirement, this seemingly innocuous need, that would tragically intertwine her life with that of a woman named Cherry Walker. Cherry Walker, at the age of 39, was in many fundamental ways the epitome of what any discerning mother would desire in a babysitter. Friends and family consistently describe her as a sweet person, very kind, always willing to help. Her essence was often distilled into a poignant observation. She's a very kind of pure-hearted person. This innate goodness, this transparent kindness, was perhaps inherited from her father, a revered preacher in Tyler, Texas. Cherry, living under the gentle spiritual guidance of her family, had never ventured far from the comforting familiarity of her hometown. Her life, while imbued with a genuine spirit of benevolence, was also shaped by an underlying health condition. She suffered from seizure disorders. This disability, while significant, was meticulously managed through medication, which allowed Cherry to lead a relatively independent life. Her episodes, typically manifesting as shaking or quivering, were known to be triggered when she became upset, highlighting her inherent vulnerability and delicate emotional balance. Despite these challenges, Cherry harbored a strong desire for self-sufficiency. She secured her own modest, 1-bedroom apartment, meticulously furnished, and while she primarily subsisted on Social Security disability payments and financial support from her loving parents, she also sought avenues for further autonomy. To that end, she worked diligently at the local Goodwill, contributing to her community and earning a little extra income. Her life was characterized by its inherent humility, a testament to her simple needs and gentle spirit. Complementing her work at Goodwill, she also engaged in babysitting, leveraging her innate love for children to earn additional cash. Cherry's profound affection for children was a defining characteristic, and it was this very attribute that served as the initial, fateful bridge between her life and Kimberly Cargill's. In the year 2009, their paths converged. Kimberly, seeking the aforementioned child care, engaged Cherry's services to look after a young son while she was at work. Cherry quickly became deeply enmeshed within the Cargill family's needs, becoming buried in two different families, as one observer noted, dedicating more time and care to Kimberly's son more than she did anybody else. This professional arrangement quickly blossomed into a deeper emotional connection. Cherry, with her pure and open heart, truly bonded with the little boy, fostering a close relationship and loving him as one of her own. The description of Cherry, universally acclaimed as a wonderful, caring, kind, open-hearted person, stood in stark contrast to the complexities and guarded nature that would soon be revealed in Kimberly. However, a poignant and deeply unsettling question would soon emerge, cutting through the initial impressions of her unwavering dependability. Was Cherry truly dependable? Because on the evening of June 18, 2010, Cherry Walker, this sweet, pure-hearted woman, would abruptly and tragically disappear. The quiet, almost forgotten stretches of rural roads just outside Tyler, Texas, became the canvas for unspeakable horror at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon of June 19, 2010. It was then, as we recall, that the lost pizza delivery driver made his shocking discovery. The image seared into his memory, what appeared to be a badly burned body. The instantaneous horror of the sight, the visceral recognition of unnatural death, compelled the driver to immediately place a desperate call to 911. Within minutes, the tranquility of the countryside was shattered by the arrival of Smith County Sheriff's deputies, their flashing lights a stark beacon against a verdant backdrop. They were met with a scene that presented an immediate and profoundly disturbing mystery. The victim, identified initially as a young African-American woman, had been summarily dumped by the side of the road, subjected to the unfathomable indignity of being doused with lighter fluid, and then deliberately set ablaze. The state of the body was grim beyond words, very badly burned, really scorched, rendering any immediate identification impossible. There was no wallet, no purse, no identification at all, erasing any quick path to who this person was. It was as if her identity had been willfully annihilated, scorched from existence. Yet, even in the midst of such widespread destruction, the meticulous, often unforgiving, gaze of forensic investigation can yield astonishing insights. As the coroner's personnel, with their grim and respectful duty, arrived to remove the remains, investigators, with trained precision, conducted a thorough sweep of the immediate vicinity, and it was there, crumpled almost insignificantly in the roadside grass, that they discovered a single, seemingly minor clue. It was an empty, single-serve cup of coffee creamer, an innocuous, disposable item that, against all odds, had remained still intact, a testament to its resilience in the face of such fiery devastation. Everything was burned except for this piece of evidence, observed a source, highlighting the profound anomaly of its survival. This small, unblemished object, the coffee creamer cup, was immediately bagged as crucial evidence and dispatched to the crime lab for rigorous analysis. Meanwhile, the ravaged remains were carefully transported to the Smith County Medical Examiner for the grim, yet essential, process of autopsy. Determining the precise cause of death proved to be a daunting challenge, complicated by the horrific condition of the body. The pathologist couldn't really pinpoint how it happened, a common difficulty in cases where bodies are extensively decomposed or, as in this particular instance, severely burned. All that the medical examiner could definitively ascertain was a critical detail: the conspicuous lack of smoke in the victim's lungs. This finding was chillingly significant, indicating unequivocally that the woman was already dead by the time she'd been set on fire. There was further evidence that perhaps she was strangled and that asphyxiation played a role, a grim suggestion of the violent final moments preceding the inferno. As for the arduous task of confirming the dead woman's identity, traditional methods were thwarted by the destruction. Fingerprints were likely burned away and facial features, charred beyond recognition, rendered visual identification impossible. This left one primary avenue open to investigators: the use of dental records. An important aspect of determining and identifying bodies in such dire circumstances. However, a significant hurdle remained. To request dental records, investigators first needed a tentative identification, a name, any lead that could direct them to the appropriate dental office for comparison. With no immediate leads forthcoming from the desolate crime scene, the investigators, adhering to standard protocol, strategically turned to the local media, broadcasting details of the tragic discovery in the hope that public awareness might generate a crucial tip. The news, disseminating the somber report of a body found, rippled to the community of Tyler, and as hoped, the following day, Sunday, June 20th, just one day after the discovery, a phone call arrived at the investigator's office. The caller was a minister from Tyler, his voice undoubtedly laden with a terrible, dawning premonition. He informed the police that his daughter, Cherry Walker, had been conspicuously absent from church that very morning, a highly unusual occurrence. Cherry's father, acutely attuned to his daughter's habits and disposition, became really concerned. She was nowhere to be found, and her absence from services at her father's church was profoundly out of character, especially so on this particular Sunday. It was Father's Day, a day of customary familial reunion and celebration. Pastor Walker, hearing the news story of a body found in Smith County, a narrative that undoubtedly sent a chill down his spine, yielded to an overwhelming gut feeling that it was his daughter. It was a terrible, almost unbearable intuition. While he desperately didn't want to believe it, the sickening feeling persisted. Tragically, for Cherry's loving family, his instincts proved to be agonizingly correct. Once the authorities had this crucial tentative identification, the medical examiner was able to swiftly, albeit sorrowfully, confirm that the dead body was, in fact, Cherry Walker. They achieved this by obtaining and utilizing her dental records from her dentist here locally, a definitive method of identification. With Cherry's identity now tragically established, the next, most urgent question pressed upon investigators: how had this sweet, developmentally challenged woman come to meet such a brutal end on a lonely country road? A critical detail was known to all who knew her. Cherry didn't drive. This meant that someone had to have taken her to that desolate location. And according to her family, a consensus emerged. It was almost certainly someone she knew. Cherry, they asserted, with her inherent cautiousness and vulnerability, wouldn't hop in the car with a stranger. This immediately narrowed the investigative focus to her circle of acquaintances. Her father, grappling with the crushing weight of his loss, provided a crucial piece of information, recalling that there was someone Cherry had been spending a lot of time with lately. This individual was a young man named Joseph Mayo, a co-worker from the local Goodwill. Joseph, when later questioned, candidly recounted their burgeoning friendship, noting, "We became friends and we started talking to each other and went over to her apartment and watched movies with her." He further shared a detail that spoke to Cherry's gentle nature, observing, she was a huge horror film fan. A seemingly innocuous piece of information that painted a picture of her simple yet earnest enthusiasms. Acting swiftly on this lead, investigators descended upon Joseph's door within hours of receiving Pastor Walker's information. Their approach was direct, authoritative. They said, "You're going to have to come with us." Joseph, undoubtedly startled and disoriented by the sudden police presence, responded with an immediate and defensive query. "And I said, for what? I didn't do anything." This initial reaction was entirely natural for someone unexpectedly confronted by law enforcement. However, it was during his subsequent interrogation at the sheriff's office. As investigators began to methodically inquire about his relationship with Cherry and the last time he had seen her, that Joseph uttered a sentence that, to their trained ears, rang with profoundly unsettling and incriminating tone. I said, "How was she killed?" he blurted out. The investigators, employing a carefully controlled poker face, seized upon this anomalous utterance. And they said, "How did you know she was killed?" They pressed. Joseph, caught in his own surprising revelation, stumbled, offering a flimsy, utterly unconvincing explanation. I said, "I don't know. I just took a guess." The seasoned investigator, however, were not easily swayed by such a transparent pretense. They recognized a deeply troubling psychological slip, a piece of information that a truly innocent individual, unaware of the grim details of the discovery, simply would not possess. They didn't believe that for a minute, launching into a more confrontational line of questioning. Joseph, feeling the intense pressure, recounts the interrogation as filled with hurtful, mean questions. He vividly remembers one investigator delivering a chilling pronouncement. "Oh, we know you did it, and you're going down." Overwhelmed, Joseph's defenses crumbled, and I was crying. I had tears coming out my eyes. "Do you honestly think I would do something like this?" he pleaded, his raw emotional distress a counterpoint to the investigator's suspicions. Cherry's other friends, privy to Joseph's character and their friendship, voiced strong doubts about his capacity for such an act. "I don't believe Joseph would do that," one friend stated, highlighting the prevailing sentiment amongst their shared social circle. Yet, investigators rely not on personal belief, but on tangible, empirical evidence. The crucial question loomed. What would the evidence say? Joseph's vehicle was subjected to a meticulous forensic examination. They fingerprinted my car. The results, however, exonerated him. "They didn't find no fingerprints except mine," he proudly declared, a significant piece of evidence that disproved his direct involvement with the transportation of Cherry's body. Furthermore, Joseph provided a solid alibi for the night prior, the critical time frame of Cherry's disappearance. He had been singing karaoke. "I wasn't nowhere near her apartment," he stated, a detail that the investigators painstakingly followed up on. When they visited the karaoke club, his alibi not only checked out, but there was even video evidence of him performing, providing irrefutable proof of his whereabouts. With the irrefutable evidence mounting in his favor, Joseph Mayo was officially cleared. The deputy said, "Don't worry, you're fine," a phrase that signaled his freedom, albeit one tainted by the shadow of unjust suspicion. Cherry's boyfriend, Joseph, may have been fine, now exonerated, but the investigators found themselves back at square one, no closer to apprehending Cherry's actual killer. The initial promising lead had dissipated, leaving them in a vacuum of information. Thus, driven by a renewed urgency, they broadened their search, diligently casting their net for any other potential leads. Their next logical step was to contact Cherry's friend, Paula Wheeler, her dedicated caretaker, an individual intimately familiar with the nuances of Cherry's life. Paula recounted the precise moment of contact. "The deputy called me at 10:20 that Sunday night, informing her the horrific discovery and that she was there confirming Cherry's tragic fate. And in a moment that would fundamentally shift the direction of the investigation, Paula's response was every bit as surprising and definitive as Joseph's had been initially. Her words cut through the night, brimming with an unshakable certainty. "I told him I know who did it." The bold, unequivocal accusation, delivered with an almost chilling confidence, hung in the air. Paula then named the killer, identifying the woman Cherry had worked for as a babysitter. "Kim Cargill did it," she declared. The investigator, caught completely off guard by the abrupt and specific nature of the accusation against someone who, on the surface, appeared to be an upstanding member of the community, was momentarily taken aback. His immediate reaction was one of skepticism, seeking corroboration for such a grave pronouncement. "He's with ma'am. You can't prove that," he challenged, the doubt evident in his tone. But Paula, undeterred and filled with a conviction that stemmed from her intimate knowledge of both women, responded with unwavering resolve. "I said, yes, I can." This defiant retort set the stage for a revelation that would crack open the seemingly impenetrable facade of Kimberly Cargill's life. The very next morning, true to her word, Paula Wheeler sat down with investigators at the sheriff's office, prepared to meticulously unravel the disturbing narrative she held. Her story, she explained, revolved around a fundamental vulnerability of Cherry's disability. According to Paula, Cherry's seizure disorders, while a significant health concern, represented only a small part of Cherry's disability. The more profound and, tragically, more exploitable aspect of Cherry's condition was her cognitive state. "She's a mental challenge. She's just like a little kid," Paula empathetically stated, clarifying that Cherry possessed the mental capacity of around a 9-year-old child. This meant that Cherry, despite her chronological age, possessed a profound innocence and a corresponding inability to fully grasp complexities and manipulative machinations of the adult world. There were, Paula explained, a myriad of things Cherry simply couldn't do for herself. This essential need for assistance was precisely how Paula knew Cherry and why she was intimately aware of her life's details. A local social service nonprofit, recognizing Cherry's unique needs, had hired Paula specifically as Cherry's caretaker. Her responsibilities were comprehensive and nurturing. I had to teach her how to live on her own. I had to teach her a phone number, her address, teach her how to cook. Paula's dedication extended to daily contact, as she would consistently call Cherry every evening to remind her to take her meds, a critical routine for managing her seizure disorder and maintaining her fragile independence. It was this deep and sustained familiarity with Cherry's childlike nature and her inherent forgetfulness that formed the basis of Paula's shocking allegations against Kimberly. According to Paula, Kimberly, far from recognizing Cherry's vulnerabilities as a cause for compassion, had instead seen them as a distinct advantage, particularly when it came to her babysitting. Paula made a series of damning accusations, alleging that Kimberly had frequently taken advantage of it. The exploitation, she claimed, was primarily financial. The majority of the time Kim did not pay Cherry, Paula asserted, a callous disregard for the agreed-upon arrangement and for Cherry's livelihood. And even when Kimberly did pay her, Paula further alleged, it was often less than she deserved. Kimberly, she stated, would employ egregious underpayment tactics, routinely compensating Cherry with like $20 a week, an insultingly meager sum for the demanding work of childcare. The rationale behind Kimberly's ability to perpetrate such exploitation, according to Paula, lay squarely in Cherry's profound inability to comprehend the value of money. "If you give her 5 ones, she thinks you have a lot of money," Paula explained, illustrating Cherry's fundamental naivete regarding financial transactions. This lack of understanding rendered Cherry susceptible to easy manipulation. The exploitation extended beyond direct payment. Paula claimed that Cherry, with her pure and generous heart, would frequently spend what little money she did have on Kimberly's son. A heartbreaking detail emerged. When Kimberly would drop him off, she wouldn't leave any extra food. Cherry would have to buy food for him. And in a poignant display of selfless devotion, Cherry, despite her own humble circumstances, would resort to using her own food stamps and buy food for child. This starkly illuminated Cherry's profound goodness in the face of Kimberly's alleged calculated cruelty. And yet, despite all these layers of alleged exploitation, despite being treated so unfairly, Paula emphasized that sweet, innocent Cherry, in her unwavering simplicity, still thought of Kimberly as a friend. Cherry, in her pure-hearted way, didn't understand that she was being taken advantage of She didn't understand it all. Her perspective was untainted by cynicism or suspicion. She was very nice and she was very compassionate. The bond of trust she formed was absolute. She trusted her, Paula explained, simplifying Cherry's emotional world with a poignant comparison. She's like a kid. You trust people that you love. This profoundly innocent trust, however, would prove to be Cherry's undoing. If Paula's detailed narrative was accurate, it painted a damning portrait of Kimberly Cargill, revealing her to be not merely a neglectful employer, but a morally reprehensible individual, a person devoid of ethical integrity. But even such character flaws, however egregious, do not inherently equate to the horrific act of murder. Paula understood this distinction, and it was here that her narrative took an even darker turn, providing a concrete and ultimately fatal motive, according to Paula. The catalyst for murder was linked to a critical event that transpired on the Friday preceding Cherry's discovery. At approximately 10:20 in the morning on that pivotal Friday, Cherry Walker, in an utterly mundane yet profoundly impactful bureaucratic action, was served with subpoena, this seemingly innocuous legal document, a formal summons, commanded Cherry to testify in court as part of the latest custody fight involving Kimberly and her little boy. The stakes were immeasurably high for Kimberly. One of her ex-husbands, along with his mother, was actively seeking joint custody of her 4-year-old son, a deeply contentious and emotionally charged legal battle. Paula, having been physically present at Cherry's apartment when the subpoena was delivered, vividly recalled Cherry's immediate reaction, a profound sense of confusion and burgeoning worry at the summons. She asked me, did she have to go? Paula, understanding the absolute imperative of the law, responded simply, yet firmly, and I said yes. The trajectory of this conversation then pivoted dramatically. Cherry, in her innocence and desire for guidance, immediately called Kimberly, her employer and perceived friend, to convey the distressing news about the summons. Kimberly's response, as relayed by Paula, was swift and manipulative. Kimberly tells Cherry, "Don't worry about it. You don't have to testify." The implication was clear. Kimberly, ever the orchestrator, was seeking to actively subvert the legal process. It was undeniably, certainly in Kimberly's best interest that Cherry not testify. The reason for this desperate desire was profoundly pragmatic. The custody hearing would undoubtedly scrutinize Kimberly's choices in childcare. If Cherry were to testify, they would find out that she was babysitting a child, that they would take the child from him. The stark truth, Paula articulated, was that Cherry Walker was frankly probably not really the best choice for a caretaker for a young child, given her known mental challenges. The potential revelation to the court that Kimberly dump your child off on a mental challenge person would be damning, severely undermining her case and risking the loss of yet another child. Concerned by the manipulative direction of Kimberly's words and sensing the gravity of the situation, Paula, in a protective act, had taken the phone from Cherry and spoken to Kim directly. The exchange was illuminating. According to Paula, Kimberly, brazenly acknowledging her intent, explicitly stated she had a plan to make sure that Cherry didn't appear in court that day. The insidious nature of this plan was revealed in Kimberly's own words. Because she would come pick her up and hide her out. The sheer audacity of this proposal, the outright intent to obstruct justice by spiriting away a key witness, underscored Kimberly's desperation and her ruthless pragmatism. The harrowing events that culminated in the discovery of Cherry Walker's burned body began to unfold. With chilling clarity on Saturday, June 19, 2010, we returned to that desolate stretch of rural road outside Tyler, Texas, where the observant pizza delivery driver, in his unwitting detour, unearthed the horrific truth. The subsequent arrival of authorities from the Smith County Sheriff's Department irrevocably confirmed the grim scene. The body was identified as 39-year-old Cherry Walker, a woman whose inherent vulnerabilities, described poignantly as some certain, what people might call mental deficiencies, and a profoundly simple nature made her a particularly tragic victim. She was, as had been stressed, not able to live on her own without some caregiver coming in every day to assist her, a stark illustration of her dependence. Her character was unequivocally portrayed as a very sweet, caring person. The question of who could perpetrate such a heinous act, deliberately setting her on fire, deepened the public shock and revulsion. The crime scene itself, despite the widespread destruction wrought by fire, had yielded one solitary, yet immensely crucial, clue that promised to point towards the perpetrator: the crumpled, intact coffee creamer found beneath Cherry's body. This seemingly insignificant item, an oversight by the killer, became a beacon of hope for investigators. Now, armed with this tangible lead, and bolstered by the specific, damning accusations leveled by Cherry's caregiver, Paula Wheeler, the investigative focus sharpened dramatically. Paula, with her intimate knowledge of Cherry's life and her unsettling insights into Kimberly Cargill's manipulative tendencies, had explicitly identified 43-year-old Kimberly Cargill as a potential killer. Kimberly, the woman who had employed Cherry to babysit her young son while she was at work, a veneer of professional, familial connection, now stood at the precipice of an unimaginable accusation. The immediate, urgent question for investigators, now armed with potential suspect, was the motive. Why would Kimberly, a purportedly respectable nurse and mother, commit such an atrocious act against her vulnerable babysitter? Paula Wheeler's narrative provided the chilling answer. It had all, according to Paula, commenced when Cherry, in her naive obedience to the law, received that fateful summons to testify in court. This legal directive was integral to a pivotal court case, one that sought to determine whether Kimberly or her ex-husband should retain custody of their 4-year-old son. It was a prospect that, according to Paula, filled Kimberly with profound and desperate anxiety. Paula recounted a pivotal conversation she'd had with Kimberly on the phone, during which Kimberly, her agitation palpable, revealed the depth of her fear. Kimberly gets on the phone with Paula and tells her if they get her to testify, she'll ruin me. The strategic importance of Cherry's potential testimony was clear to Kimberly. As Paula articulated, the decisions that parents make on the caregiver for their child is going to come into play. And in a case where the caregiver possessed the mental capacity of a child, the implications for Kimberly were devastatingly clear. It's going to be pretty obvious in a situation like this to a judge that the caregiver has the mental capacity of a child. You'll dump your child off on a mental challenged person. Such a revelation would undoubtedly paint Kimberly in an exceptionally negative light, imperiling her custody battle and threatening to strip her of yet another one of her children. Therefore, according to Paula's detailed account, Kimberly, driven by this desperate fear, had formulated a stark and ruthless plan to prevent Cherry from testifying. Kimberly said she was going to take her to her house and hide her out, Paula recounted, illustrating Kimberly's audacious intent to obstruct justice. This was not a plan born of ignorance, but of cunning calculation. Paula, recognizing profound legal and moral implications of such an act, had vigorously rejected the notion, emphatically telling Kimberly that Cherry simply couldn't do that. She vehemently asserted its illegality and ethical bankruptcy. It was crazy. It was illegal. 2. This is a subpoena. This means you have to go testify. But Kimberly, undeterred by Paula's warnings and driven by an escalating sense of desperation, persisted in her manipulative attempts to coerce Cherry. She kept calling her, applying relentless pressure. And when these incessant phone calls failed to bend Cherry to her will, Paula claimed that Kimberly resorted to a more direct approach, attempting to orchestrate a face-to-face meeting. Cherry, profoundly distressed by the escalating pressure, made a poignant, final call to Paula. Cherry called me again right before 8 o'clock, and she said, "I don't feel good. Paula, I'm nervous. Kim wants to take me out to eat. and I don't want to go. The simple utterance of, I don't want to go, highlighted Cherry's inherent fear of displeasing Kimberly, her inability to articulate a firm refusal to someone she deeply, albeit tragically, trusted. She was afraid to tell her no, Paula clarified, a heartbreaking insight into Cherry's psychological vulnerability. Paula, fully comprehending the perilous nature of Kimberly's invitation, had earnestly urged Cherry not to go. She provided direct, protective counsel. She tells her, you should just lock the door and don't go out with her. It was a plea rooted in grave concern. Yet, despite her best efforts, Paula harbored a chilling premonition, an overwhelming fear that Cherry, in her trusting nature and inherent inability to resist a stronger will, had ultimately not heeded her advice. It was agonizingly my last conversation with her. But did this compelling narrative, this intricate tapestry of motive and manipulation, truly constitute proof of murder? While Cherry's caregiver, Paula, remained absolutely convinced, asserting unequivocally that Kim's motive for killing Cherry was to keep her child. The investigators, bound by the strictures of legal proof, approached the accusation with a necessary degree of skepticism. Kimberly, on the surface, did not align with the archetypal image of an individual capable of such a heinous crime. From a detached, external perspective, Kim Cargill seemed like the average mother. She worked as a nurse. She had several children. She lived in a nice home. The disjunction between this public persona and the horrific act of which she was accused created an immediate cognitive dissonance for the investigating officers. However, as the investigators began to peel back the carefully constructed layers of Kimberly's life, scrutinizing her past with renewed focus, a different, far more unsettling picture began to emerge. They unearthed a long, often bitter history of disputes with her ex-husbands, a recurrent pattern of acrimony that had already resulted in the painful loss of custody for 3 of her 4 children. This stark record painted a portrait of deep-seated instability and a persistent inability to maintain stable relationships or secure parental control. And with another custody hearing just days away, Kimberly was facing profoundly agonizing possibility of losing another son. This critical confluence of events, a history of losing custody, and the imminent threat of losing her youngest, provided a powerful, undeniable motive. For the Smith County Sheriff's Office, this burgeoning desperation, coupled with Paula's credible allegations, was unequivocally enough to put Kimberly at the top of the list of possible killers. They now possessed a suspect with motive and opportunity, a crucial juncture in any murder investigation. Everything pointed to Kim Cargill, an investigator confirmed, recognizing the terrifying clarity that was beginning to crystallize. The imperative now was undeniable. Could they find the incontrovertible proof required to secure a conviction? The very next day, driven by this urgent quest for concrete evidence, sheriff's investigators successfully obtained a search warrant for Kimberly's vehicle. Such an act is common practice, a routine step to uncover potential forensic links to a crime. What they discovered, however, was far from routine, almost unsettlingly so. Kimberly's car, known to others as a receptacle of daily life's accumulated detritus, was spotless. It had been thoroughly cleaned out. This pristine condition, in and of itself, immediately triggered a flag of suspicion for the experienced investigators. It was not merely tidy. It was meticulously sanitized, almost as if erased. This observation was reinforced by those who knew Kimberly well. "I've never seen her car clean," one individual remarked, articulating a stark contrast between its usual state and its current gleaming condition. The familiar imagery of her typical vehicle was conjured. It's always just really disgusting. Like, just, paper and food and everything. Fast food bags. Chick-fil-A wrappers and Burger King bags and dairy wrappers and creamers. In light of this strikingly uncharacteristic cleanliness, The investigators could only logically conclude that Kimberly's suddenly pristine car was no coincidence. It screamed of deliberate action, an intentional effort to expunge traces of a recent event. The question that loomed in the minds of the seasoned officers was chillingly precise. Is she cleaning her car to clean out evidence? This almost obsessive cleansing spoke volumes, hinting at a desperate attempt to conceal, to literally scrub away the remnants of a horrifying act. Yet, despite her apparent meticulousness, had Kimberly, in her desperate haste, inadvertently overlooked one crucial piece of evidence. Precisely because it was no longer in her car, but at the desolate crime scene, investigators reflected on that single, enduring clue, the dairy creamer. While they were at the scene and collecting evidence, they found dairy creamers from Burger King. The realization was stark. Given her documented predilection for fast food, this single-serve creamer, so seemingly inconsequential, could be the thread that connected her directly to the murder site. The chilling hypothesis formed. Had she inadvertently dropped the creamer container at the crime scene? This became the investigators' primary suspicion, the crucial forensic bridge they sought to establish. All that remained was to obtain a DNA sample to compare it with. The path to securing this sample, serendipitously, was about to present itself. As the murder investigation into Cherry Walker's death continued to unfold with tenacious resolve, another distinct legal process was also actively progressing. The various Child Protective Services, CPS, cases lodged against Kimberly Cargill. These parallel proceedings, which had long underscored Kimberly's ongoing struggles with parental rights, reached a critical juncture with the case that had recently stripped her of the custody of her 11-year-old son. 3 months prior to Cherry's brutal death, in March of that year, the boy's father, acting on a deeply alarming set of observations, had approached the authorities with some shocking allegations against Kimberly. His accusations painted a grim portrait of her as abusive. She was violent. He spoke with palpable distress about how extremely difficult it was for people like myself and the other fathers involved to be able to protect their children and to remove them from an extremely abusive environment, echoing the experiences of others caught in Kimberly's orbit. Crucially, this time, unlike perhaps previous allegations that had foundered on a lack of concrete proof, Kimberly's ex-husband claimed to possess tangible evidence to substantiate his accusations. He provided photos of the boy's bruises, stark visual testament to the alleged abuse. These allegations, backed by physical evidence, had set in motion a separate but significant legal process. Consequently, on June 24, 2010, merely 2 days after the search of Kimberly's car and barely a week after Cherry Walker's body was found, the culmination of these investigations led to Kimberly's arrest. The charge, injury to a child. This arrest, while independent of the murder inquiry, presented the Smith County Sheriff's Office with an unforeseen and invaluable opportunity. When Kimberly was booked into jail, investigators, under perfectly legal protocols, seized a chance to collect a DNA sample. Their intent was precise, to analyze it and, crucially, to see if they could connect her to a container of coffee creamer found near Cherry Walker's body. The creamer, once an anomaly, now loomed as a potential linchpin of their murder case. They had that dairy creamer, and the waiting game began, the tension palpable as they anticipated the forensic results. During this period of anxious anticipation, while the DNA tests were pending, another significant piece of information unexpectedly surfaced. A friend of Kimberly's, presumably grappling with the recent unsettling events, came forward to share details of an interesting conversation she'd had with Kimberly shortly after Cherry's body had been found. Kimberly, her friend recounted, had initiated the call, and her tone had been markedly very agitated. In the course of this highly charged conversation, Kimberly had shockingly informed her friend that her babysitter had been found burned and dead in a field. What struck both the investigators and Indeed, proved profoundly puzzling to Kimberly's friend was the precise timing of the call. At the time Kimberly placed this call, the official name of the deceased person had not been released to the public. The details surrounding the grim discovery were known only to a select few within law enforcement and medical examiner circles. This created an immediate, glaring question. How did Kimberly know that the body was Cherry's and, more specifically, that it had been found burned? Was it merely a serendipitous gut feeling, a chillingly accurate premonition, much like the one that had led Cherry's own father to call the authorities? Or, as the investigators intuitively suspected, was it something else entirely? The answer, both definitive and damning, would arrive soon enough. The forensic results from the DNA test, when they finally came back, delivered a categorical and irrefutable answer to the investigators' questions and suspicions. The DNA extracted from a single-serve coffee creamer found beneath Cherry Walker's charred body belonged unequivocally to Kimberly Cargill. They found DNA from Kimberly Cargill, a source confirmed, underscoring the finality of this discovery. This forensic match was, in the words of a confident investigator, the last nail in the coffin because it put her at the scene. It was a tangible scientific proof, undeniable and absolute, that solidified Kimberly's connection to the horrific crime. On July 29, 2010, a little over 1 month after Cherry's mutilated and burned body had been discovered on that lonely stretch of road, the Smith County Sheriff's Office once again placed Kimberly Cargill under arrest. This time, the charge was not injury to a child. This time, the gravity of the accusation was absolute, final, and chilling murder. The complex layers of her troubled life, the facade of normalcy, had finally and irretrievably collapsed, revealing the monstrous truth lurking beneath. The full weight of the justice system converged upon Kimberly Cargill on May 7th, 2012, as she stood trial for murder in a Tyler, Texas courtroom. The 45-year-old mother of four faced the most serious accusation imaginable, the killing of Cherry Walker in June of 2010. This was no ordinary legal proceeding. It was, as observers would later describe, a huge deal, electrifying the close-knit community of East Texas. The shocking nature of the crime, an ostensibly respectable mother of four accused of murdering her own babysitter, was amplified by the profound vulnerability of the victim, 39-year-old Cherry Walker, a developmentally challenged woman who endured seizure disorders and possessed the approximate mental capacity of a 9 or 10-year-old child, was unequivocally depicted as a sweet, innocent kid in a dust body, a profoundly empathetic portrayal that resonated deeply with the public and the jury alike. According to the prosecution's compelling opening statement, Cherry's very childlike innocence was, paradoxically and tragically, precisely why Kimberly had murdered her. The state laid out a clear, meticulously constructed motive to prevent the vulnerable woman she had employed as a babysitter from testifying in a crucial legal hearing, one that held the power to determine the ultimate custody of Kimberly's 4-year-old son. The prosecution articulated Kimberly's profound fear, explaining that she feared that if Cherry testified in the upcoming custody hearing, which was set for June 23rd, that she would lose her son. This impending loss, another wrenching removal of a child from her grasp, served as the ultimate catalyst. The prosecution continued, detailing the sequence of events that culminated in murder. On June 18th, Cherry, in her unwavering adherence to legal processes, called Kimberly to convey the distressing news. She had received a subpoena, a direct court order compelling her to testify. This was a precise moment, according to the prosecution, that led to the decision to take matters into real hands, literally. The state asserted that Kimberly had confronted Cherry, her desperation spiraling into savage violence. The state said that Kim strangled Cherry. Having extinguished Cherry's life, the prosecution's theory then outlined the callous aftermath. Kimberly, with the lifeless body of her former babysitter, embarked on a grim nocturnal journey. She had driven Cherry's lifeless body out to a remote stretch of country road. Once there, in the desolate solitude of the East Texas night, she executed the next appalling step of her macabre plan. She dumped out her car, put lighter fluid on her, set her on fire, and just drove away. The sheer depravity of this act, the dehumanization of Cherry, was presented with chilling gravity. The defense's inevitable contention of Kimberly's distress was met with a preemptive rebuttal. "She's trying to set us up," the prosecution declared, suggesting a calculated attempt to manipulate perception. A key pillar of the prosecution's case centered on the meticulous nature of Kimberly's crime, specifically the use of an accelerant. The very fact that Kimberly brought lighter fluid with her was presented as undeniable proof that Cherry's murder had been premeditated. This was not an impulsive act born of sudden rage. The prosecutor reasoned, "I don't think a lot of people are going to be carrying an accelerant that can be lighted easily around in their car without specific malevolent intent." If the crime was indeed premeditated, the prosecutor underscored, then it elevated the charge to first-degree murder, a crime of profound and deliberate malice. For such a calculated act, the ultimate penalty loomed over Kimberly. She was facing the death penalty. To painstakingly build their case for conviction, the prosecution called her first and arguably most compelling witness, Cherry's caregiver, Paula Wheeler. Paula's testimony was delivered with unwavering conviction, recounting the intricate psychological warfare Kimberly had waged against Cherry. She detailed how Kimberly had spent much of the afternoon on June 18, 2010, on the phone with Cherry, urging her not to testify. Kimberly's tactics were manipulative and insidious. She told Cherry that she didn't have to go to court, subtly attempting to undermine the legal imperative. However, Paula had explained the subpoena's gravity to Cherry, empowering the vulnerable woman to make an autonomous decision. Cherry, with her inherent respect for authority and the law, had made up her mind that she was going to follow the law, and Kim didn't like it. This independent decision, a defiant act of self-determination, solidified Kimberly's motive. So profoundly did Kimberly disapprove, according to Paula, that she kept calling Cherry. The calls weren't merely attempts to persuade. They were a relentless barrage, a psychological siege. Kimberly offered Ed to take her out to dinner to talk things over, a feigned act of friendship designed to lure Cherry into her control. Paula, recognizing the inherent danger in this invitation, vividly recounted how she had urged Cherry to refuse. Yet, despite her best efforts and dire warnings, a sense of tragic inevitability hung in the air. "I thought Cherry would listen to me, and that she wasn't going to go with Kim, but she did." The prosecution meticulously corroborated Paula's testimony through hard, empirical evidence. Kimberly and Cherry's cell phone records both confirmed Paula's account. The call logs painted a damning picture of relentless pressure. Kim had been calling Cherry incessantly all day. The day before she disappeared, there were over 70 phone calls by Ms. Cargill to Cherry Walker's phone. This volume of calls, this obsessive pursuit, was undeniably suggestive of extreme manipulation and control. But, as the prosecution chillingly highlighted, the truly damning thing about the phone calls was what happened after June 18th, the night that Cherry died. Abruptly, with a terrifying finality, the phone calls just stopped. There was an absolute cessation of contact. There was no phone calls from Kim Cargill to Cherry Walker. The prosecutors, presenting the sudden silence as a damning indictment, offered a straightforward, horrifying explanation. She obviously knew what happened. Kimberly's knowledge stemmed from her presence at the very scene of the crime. And that presence, the prosecution reminded the jury, was irrefutably proven. The solitary, yet crucial, empty container of coffee creamer found at the murder scene served as the silent witness, testifying to Kimberly's involvement. According to the prosecutor, The empty container of coffee creamer found at the crime scene proved that Cherry's body had been dumped from Kimberly's car. The scientific confirmation sealed the evidentiary chain. Once they had that dairy creamer tested, they found DNA from Kimberly Cargill. The confluence of these elements, motive, opportunity, and DNA evidence that put her at the scene of the crime, painted a powerful, almost airtight case against Kimberly. The state had a lot of evidence, observed a commentator, emphasizing the formidable prosecutorial arsenal. However, despite the seemingly overwhelming body of evidence, one crucial element, one deeply unsettling gap, plagued the prosecution's case. It was an absence that the jury would later struggle with during their deliberations. A persistent point of contention. The weakness in the prosecution's case was they couldn't really determine the absolute cause of death. While the medical examiner had diligently performed her duties, the extensive burning of Cherry's body had unfortunately obscured the definitive pathway of her death. All that the pathologist could definitively state was the presence of a telltale swelling in the tiny blood vessels behind Cherry's eyes, a phenomenon that could suggest manual strangulation. The pathologist said she could have been strangled. Yet, even this highly suggestive finding was not without ambiguity, not without an alternative explanation that could sow the seeds of reasonable doubt. As the medical examiner reluctantly conceded, the specific condition of the body also offered another possible, albeit less conclusive, explanation. Because her body was upside down, that blood might have just been pooling. This scientific uncertainty, this inability to unequivocally declare a single, specific mechanism of death, explained the somewhat vague official determination. The cause of death, rather than a precise medical finding, was broadly termed homicidal violence. An expert clarified they didn't honestly know how she died. This crucial concession, this slippage in definitive forensic certainty, was a significant vulnerability. They kind of left the door open for the defense to come in and try to raise reasonable doubt. A seasoned observer noted, understanding the profound impact of this ambiguity in a capital murder trial. And this precise crack in the prosecution's seemingly impenetrable armor was precisely what the defense meticulously exploited when they commenced the presentation of their case on May 16th. Kimberly's attorney, in his opening statement, adopted a bold and strategic approach. He did not deny the abhorrent actions that had occurred in the East Texas night. He did not dispute that Kimberly dumped Cherry's body by the side of the road, nor did he attempt to obfuscate the fact that she'd set her on fire. However, he vehemently challenged the implication of these actions. According to the defense, these appalling deeds did not, by logical extension, mean that Kimberly had killed Cherry. This was the crux of their argument, the pivot point of their reasonable doubt. The defense's counter-narrative was starkly different, predicated on a claim of tragic accident and desperate cover-up. Their version was that Cherry had died of some other medical condition, rather than as a result of a direct, intentional act of violence perpetrated by Kimberly. To meticulously construct this alternative sequence of events, to offer a plausible explanation for the unspeakable actions, the defense turned to their primary witness, the individual whose testimony held the greatest potential to sway the jury's perception, Kimberly Cargill herself. Kimberly Cargill did take the stand. When she took her place in the witness box, facing the jury, Kimberly Cargill presented an image that seemed utterly incongruous with the monstrous acts of which she stood accused. Her demeanor was carefully controlled, embodying the Jekyll facade she had meticulously cultivated throughout her life. She certainly didn't look like someone capable of committing such a brutal murder. Observers noted that Kim Cargill came across as a very quiet, sort of meek individual in court. She projected an air of profound vulnerability, appearing very timid, just a nice, sweet, average person. This presentation, calculated, ornate, was designed to evoke empathy, to shatter the jury's preconceived notions of a cold-blooded killer. On the stand, Kimberly readily admitted to her underlying anxieties. She did not deny being concerned about the upcoming custody hearing, openly articulating how she was very worried about losing her children. This concession to maternal fear was intended to humanize her, to suggest that her desperate actions stemmed from a place of profound anguish rather than malevolent intent. However, her narrative diverged sharply from the prosecution's regarding her incessant calls to Cherry. She claimed the reason she called Cherry so many times that day wasn't talk her out of testifying. Instead, Kimberly posited she had only wanted to find out what Cherry was going to say, asserting that her motivations were rooted in self-preservation, in understanding the landscape of the legal battle. Her plan, she claimed, was innocent. She was going to take Cherry out to dinner, and they were just going to talk about the whole thing. Kimberly then meticulously detailed her version of the evening, weaving a tale of unexpected tragedy. She claimed that she picks up at Cherry, and they go to dinner at 9:30 p.m. They have dinner for about an hour. This part of her story, innocuous on its own, set the stage for the dramatic, tragic turning point. According to Kimberly, dinner proceeded without incident, but disaster struck on the drive home. Cherry wants to be dropped off at some friend's house, and Kimberly tells her no. This refusal, a seemingly minor disagreement, escalated quickly, and Cherry becomes upset. This was the trigger. Kimberly testified that Cherry had a very bad nervous condition. She would shake real bad when she'd get upset. And on that fateful night, as the tension mounted and Cherry's agitation intensified, Kimberly claimed Cherry's shaking had become uncontrollable. Then came the horrifying climax of her account. Cherry started having a seizure. The image was vivid, chilling. Kimberly's testimony continued, painting a picture of desperate, involuntary self-harm. She started banging her head against the passenger side window. Reacting to this medical emergency, Kimberly said she had instinctively pulled out of traffic, stopped the car, and tried to perform CPR on the by then unresponsive Cherry. But she claimed it was all tragically too late. Kim tried to help her, but Cherry died. The seizure, in her account, was the ultimate cause of death, an unforeseen, uncontrollable medical catastrophe. The moment of realization, when she understood that Cherry was dead, led to what Kimberly described as an overwhelming, incapacitating panic. She's crying. She's sobbing in front of the jury. Her performance was undeniably emotional, raw, and seemingly heartfelt. Yes, I did something wrong. What I did was I made a mistake, she tearfully confessed, admitting to the profoundly unethical, illegal disposal of the body, but fiercely denying the murder itself. Her profound fear, she insisted, consumed her. Kim said she felt like she had to get rid of the body because she didn't want to be accused of killing Cherry. Driven by this overwhelming, primal fear of accusation, Kimberly, according to her own testimony, made a second, equally snap, yet strategically motivated, decision. She decides, I've got to get rid of the DNA evidence. I've got to do that. This admission of a calculated attempt to destroy evidence, however framed by panic, underscored a level of cunning. And then came the audacious explanation for the lighter fluid. So she just happens to have some lighter fluid in the car and some form of starting that lighter. Fluid. This casual mention of an accelerant being just happens to have, in her vehicle, strained credulity, raising immediate questions of its convenient presence. Her narrative continued. So she douses her body with the lighting fluid and sets the body on fire. Finally, her story completed. Her emotional ordeal on the stand concluded. Kimberly wrapped up her testimony by reiterating her profound shame for her actions. Her attorney, providing an opening for further humanization, asked her a poignant question while she was on the stand. "Who were you thinking about that night?" To which she responded, her voice purportedly heavy with self-reproach. "And she said myself." Her crying was sustained, her insistence on panic unwavering. She cried quite a bit on the witness stand, and she kept saying over and over again how she had. Panicked, she didn't know what else to do. That, in essence, was Kimberly's complete defense, a desperate plea for understanding and leniency. But the prosecution, with their meticulous understanding of Kimberly's deep-seated personality traits and professional background, utterly refused to believe her carefully constructed narrative of panic and accidental death. And during their rigorous cross-examination, they meticulously dismantled her testimony, ensuring that the jury understood precisely why. Their rebuttal was surgical and pointed. Kimberly Cargill was not an ordinary citizen unversed in emergency protocols. She's a nurse. This fact alone rendered her claims of debilitating panic profoundly suspect. She knew exactly what to do in a medical emergency, particularly with an unresponsive patient. It simply didn't seem very likely that she would have panicked to the extent of abandoning medical assistance for destruction of evidence. The obvious, damning questions hung heavy in the courtroom air, challenging the very core of her narrative. Why didn't she call 911? Why didn't she try to seek medical attention? According to the seasoned prosecutor, the answer was chillingly straightforward and pointed directly to premeditation, to a calculated intent. She knew exactly what she was going to do when she got Ms. Walker in the car. Her actions were not those of a panicking civilian. They were the cold, calculated moves of a killer intent on avoiding detection. On May 18th, 2012, the tension within the Smith County Courthouse in Tyler, Texas, was palpable as a jury, after days of intense deliberation, returned to announce their verdict in the murder trial of Kimberly Cargill, the 45-year-old mother of four, a woman who had, for so long, meticulously maintained a veneer of normalcy and professional competence, now faced the ultimate judgment for the heinous killing of Cherry Walker, the developmentally disabled woman she had employed as her babysitter. The narrative of her crime, fueled by the desperate attempt to prevent Cherry from testifying against her in court, had gripped the community, highlighting both the victim's profound vulnerability and the depths of the accused's manipulative capacity. Throughout the trial, the prosecution had meticulously presented a wealth of compelling evidence, constructing a powerful argument concerning Kimberly's motive and opportunity. However, despite their diligent efforts, one crucial element, one forensic nuance, had remained elusive, becoming a persistent point of contention that had undeniably troubled the jury during their deliberations. The thing that really hung up the jury was that autopsy, an observer noted, highlighting the ambiguity that lingered regarding the precise medical cause of Cherry's death. They didn't have specific details about how Kim Cargill killed Cherry. The lack of a definitive, irrefutable cause of death had created a vacuum of certainty, a space where reasonable doubt could, theoretically, take root. Yet, in the face of this ambiguity, in weighing the overwhelming circumstantial and DNA evidence against the defense's implausible narrative of accidental death and panic cover-up, the jury reached their decision. The foreman rose, and the verdict was read. She was found guilty. The word resonated with definitive finality, piercing through the courtroom silence. However, in the unique legal landscape of Texas, a guilty verdict in a capital murder trial does not mark the absolute conclusion of the legal process. Instead, if the person convicted, they move into a whole sentencing trial, a separate phase designed to determine the appropriate penalty. Now, the weighty and profoundly moral question that confronted the jury was whether to condemn a mother of four to death row. Kimberly, with her carefully crafted courtroom persona, had initially come across to some as a sympathetic figure, an image carefully curated by the defense to mitigate the severity of her alleged crimes. But the prosecution, understanding the insidious nature of Kimberly's manipulation, viewed this perceived sympathy as precisely what rendered her so dangerous. Their argument painted a stark psychological portrait. She has a Jekyll and Hyde personality. The outward meekness was but a thin disguise, a facade concealing a volatile, predatory core. She was a powder keg waiting to explode. The prosecution asserted emphasizing the inherent danger she posed to others. To substantiate this chilling claim, to shatter any lingering vestiges of jury sympathy, the prosecution introduced a litany of witnesses, all prepared to testify about Kimberly's long-standing, often violent, temper. The testimony that followed was shocking, revealing a pattern of rage and abuse that stretched far beyond the confines of Cherry Walker's. Murder. One of her ex-husbands recounted an incident that chilled the courtroom, testifying that Kim Cargill once threw a hammer at his head because he forgot to get her sundae, dessert with no nuts on it. This seemingly trivial provocation underscored the extremity of her unbridled rage, her willingness to resort to dangerous violence over the most minor perceived slight. But the true, gut-wrenching shock came when 3 of Kimberly's own children were called to the stand. Their testimony, delivered with an undeniable raw honesty, utterly obliterated any remaining illusion of Kimberly's innocence or maternal benevolence. Their poignant accounts made it horrifyingly clear that Kimberly's choice of an intellectually challenged babysitter was, in fact, the least of her egregious failings as a parent. These children, bearing the deep psychological scars of their upbringing, testified that she tortured them. The details were agonizingly specific, each revelation a hammer blow to any remaining shred of jury compassion. One of her children testified that one time he folded her clothes wrong, and she strangled him until he passed out. This was not merely corporal punishment. It was sadistic, life-threatening abuse, an act of unadulterated cruelty perpetrated by a mother against her own child for a minor infraction. Another child's response, when asked a profoundly simple yet deeply probing question about what life was like living with his mother, was especially heartbreaking, distilling pervasive terror that had defined their existence. There was never a moment when I wasn't afraid. The collective weight of these harrowing narratives resonated profoundly. It became terrifyingly evident that Sherry Walker was not Kim Cargill's only victim. The murder of her vulnerable babysitter was not an isolated act of desperation, but merely the gruesome culmination of a life marked by consistent cruelty, control, and violence directed at those closest and most vulnerable to her. Needless to say, by the time Kimberly's own children finished recounting their horrifying, deeply traumatic stories, whatever vestige of sympathy the jury might have harbored for Kimberly had long since vanished, replaced by revulsion and a clear-eyed understanding of the true depths of her character. The sentencing phase concluded, and the jury, having heard the full, unvarnished truth of Kimberly Cargill, rendered their ultimate judgment. The jury sentenced Kim Cargill to death. The outcome of the trial, a verdict of capital punishment, evoked complex, often conflicting emotions among those closest to Sherry Walker. The victim's family, while unified in their grief and their desire for justice, found themselves divided on the outcome. One perspective favored a prolonged suffering. I wanted her to get life so she can go through and suffer, reflecting a desire for retribution commensurate with the torment Sherry had endured. Another, however, found solace in the absolute finality of the sentence. I'm glad she got the death penalty because she took away the only thing that made me happy. These disparate responses underscore the profound and personal nature of their loss, their differing paths to understanding justice. Yet, despite their varied perspectives on the exact nature of the punishment, there was absolute, unwavering unanimity on one thing when it came to Kimberly Cargill: the premeditated murder of someone as inherently sweet and vulnerable as Sherry was, unequivocally, clearly the act of a monster. Their final words, delivered with a mix of sorrow and conviction, served as a profound testament to Sherry's pure spirit and a damning indictment of Kimberly's evil. Cher Sick was a good-hearted person. She couldn't understand how people are evil like Kim was. She don't have a heart. The ultimate psychological assessment was simple, yet devastatingly accurate. Kim was pretty on the outside, but she was evil and twisted on the inside. This chilling pronouncement served as a final, enduring truth, a stark reminder that beneath the most carefully constructed facades, truly terrifying evil can lurk, forever scarring the lives it touches, and forever reminding us of the vigilant pursuit of justice that must prevail against such darkness. The battle for justice for Sherry Walker and for all those silently tormented saw a good triumph over evil, leaving a profound educational message for the community about the insidious nature of psychological abuse and the imperative to protect the most vulnerable among us.